right, listen up, guys. Winter is here. And if you're powering through the holiday chaos like I am, it's time to ditch the coffee jitters. I want you to try Mud Water. This is a clean coffee alternative that will keep you energetic without the crash. I'm talking chai, cacao, and adaptogens like lion's mane and reishi. Every ingredient in Mud Water is organic, non-GMO, it's vegan, gluten-free, and guys, get ready for this, there is zero sugar. That's what makes Mud Water the perfect way to keep energy clean and focused with no late night regrets. You can say goodbye to those sleepless nights. Mud Water's gonna give you all the fuel with none of the burnouts. Guys, take a scoop, put it in water, stir, sit back and drink. It's that easy. I like to add creamer and sometimes I get real fancy and put a little honey in there. That's up to you. And I got a deal for you. I want you to go to mudwtr.com/Chael. That's a 43% savings. Right now, we're going to include free shipping and we're even going to put in a free frother. When they ask, tell them I sent you. Get a new boost in life this winter with Mud Water. Head to mudwater.com right now. Get your starter pack today or just click on the link below.
Belal, Conor, what's your take? It's an interesting spot, isn't it? It's not like trash talk that we've ever seen before from either guy. And the element that's missing in terms of comparing Belal versus Conor's trash talk to previous interviews by both guys is the fight, the ability to fight, an appetite for a fight, a desire by the audience to see said fight, or a debate amongst each other and the onlookers, us, as to who would win that fight. That was, of the many things that Conor had, that was one of them. One of the reasons it's so much of that stuck and hit its mark is he was so good. We couldn't count him out, including in a sport that he's never done, boxing. We could not count him out. It didn't seem likely, but we couldn't count him out. And the idea of Conor and versus Belal is so egregiously silly. It's an interesting spot. I mean, what you do with Conor is a very interesting spot. I do not believe that Conor is or should be considered anything other than retired. You could have a discussion of does he come back, but the only thing that lacks the word retired or former fighter is Conor saying it. I mean, don't forget that. That's all the retirement is. So, right, the guy comes out and he says it. But contrary to what many of you believe, it is not just a word that you use. In this space, and specifically with the drug testing agencies, it is a legal word. And I share that with you because I thought you might find that interesting. But the only thing different than Conor, if he was to come back, if he was to return, if he's going to get back into camp, he's going to pick a weight class, find an opponent, go through that whole process again. The only thing that does not make it a return fight is to have a return fight, you have to have retired in the first place. But I would share with you, I do not believe he makes that walk again. But let's say he did. And we're going to learn a lot about it because we've seen it. Nick Diaz is not Conor McGregor, but he was the next best thing. The loudest response you would get if you threw a guy, called a cameo, you throw a guy's face up on the screen, outside of Conor McGregor, is Nick Diaz. And I understand that I might be going back. But when Nick came back, and what did he have, 5 years off? Is that what it was? When he came in and took on Lawler? But we did learn a little bit about the UFC and what they would do in that kind of a situation where it isn't really a rankings match. In fact, you can change the weight class. You can flip a coin for the weight class. It doesn't make that much difference. And we got an idea what the UFC was going to do, including when Nick did this again and he was matched up with Luque. Now, a really big clue is going to be what happens with Jorge Masvidal. The idea of George returning, it's either, right? Now, George would serve himself well to get in front of this. Jorge Masvidal stumbled into some real stardom in this sport. And it turned out that he was a pretty interesting guy. Just didn't quite know how to bring that to the camera. It turned out that George with long hair was more interesting to you guys than George with short hair. Just for example, there was a couple of things that changed, but for the most part, for people that knew George, he just finally got discovered. And I share it from that perspective because he wasn't like a master at the game. He was not a Colby. He was not an Adesanya. He is not an O'Malley. But he was as popular as any of those guys. But it's important to know who got there through design and strategy and who stumbled into that. It's important. Because one thing that is missing from George, George never got to defend the BMF title, but to this day, hasn't connected the dots on why. Just for example, like this isn't a massive student of the sport. George would serve himself very well. Make no mistake, George either fights Leon, which doesn't look like it's going to happen, or George fights a young stud, and it will be irreversible. You're not irreversible. You're not even damaged losing to Colby, losing to Kamara, losing to Gilbert Burns. You're not even damaged losing to Nate Diaz. It doesn't matter if it happened, doesn't matter if it didn't happen. You're going to get a huge media tour, huge attention. Those really big fights, they can go either way. The audience happens to understand that in this sport better than it does in boxing. Off you go. If you go lose to a guy who cannot hold his own at a press conference, if you go lose a guy that is clearly a B-side, if you go lose to a guy that's ranked number 13, if you go lose to a guy that is equal to or south of 27 years old, that damage is irreversible. The crowd is no longer with you. It's no longer okay. It's no, oh, cool, you're going to come back. It's just not like that. That's fine. Everybody has to face that. That is not unique to George. What I'm sharing with you is it's a very big mistake that George does not get in front of that. All Jorge Masvidal has to do to get in front of that is say a name. That's it. If George called out Luque, he would be fighting Luque. If he called out Ian Gary, he would be fighting Ian Gary. I'm just offering you examples. So, it's a big deal that you understand that, though, because when Conor comes back, if Conor comes back, I think we can have a meaningful debate amongst our community. Does Conor come or does he not? And you've only got two choices, right? Conor fights again, Conor doesn't fight again, and you probably go 70-30, 60-40, depending on the people that you ask, leaning towards he does not. But that's still a 30 to 40% chance that he does. That's pretty strong. I think if I changed it by 1 degree and said, can we all agree that at least what we believe in our hearts and minds, that if Conor does fight again, he will only fight one more time? Can we agree he's not fighting twice? And to that, I think now we start to see more of a 95, 97% agreeing that. And it's important that you look at it from that perspective, because who are you going to put him with? Chandler was a perfect opponent. Chandler still works. Chandler is the correct answer. But let's say you remove Chandler. Who do you put him with? You guys would really like to see, well, we could solve this problem with Masvidal versus Conor. You'd really like to see that. I get it. You're not going to. Nate Diaz. Nate versus Conor. That would be, if you're a checkers player, and I know that you are, you're going to go just tonight. You'd have a real box office there. But when you're trying to guess what's going to happen, what we're really asking is, what do we think Dana is going to think? And Dana does not play checkers. He plays chess. He is several steps ahead. And if your match does not have meaning for the future, a potential to take you somewhere else, Dana White will not book that match. So that's where you start to see, if Conor were to return and not be in there with Chandler, that's where you start to see the likelihood of Conor finding himself across from Paddy the Baddy going up exponentially. For example, you got to control those things. So when Conor's coming after Belal, he didn't want anything to do with Belal. But we understand that, which is what makes this back and forth different. And Joe Rogan did not try to blast Muhammad at all. Joe made it funny. He was actually trying to put him over. It got changed. Until Conor took his perspective and laughed at him for that, I thought it was, I got it. Like, oh, security doesn't, yeah, that's what it is. It wasn't a joke at all. It was, here's what's happening. Security doesn't know he's the champ. Like, it's a message. Hey, security, are you paying attention here? Help him get in. Like, it was Joe's way of helping. And for Conor to take the shot, fair game. But for Belal to fire back, right? It's also fair game. But this is a unique battle because there is 0 times 0 chance of that fight happening. Or is there? What's that old Jim Carrey line? 0.00, 1 in a billion? So you're saying there's a chance.